I'm Allison Jonjak, the Cranberry Outreach Specialist with the University of Wisconsin-Madison Division of Extension. These videos are the on-demand recordings of UW Extension and the Wisconsin State Cranberry Growers Association's virtual brown bag lunch series. These monthly sessions offer growers and researchers a way to share timely and relevant information. We hope you'll enjoy and continue to engage with us. I'm Allison Jonjak, the Cranberry Outreach Specialist with the University of Wisconsin-Madison Division of Extension. These videos are the on-demand recordings of UW Extension and the Wisconsin State Cranberry Growers Association's virtual brown bag lunch series. These monthly sessions offer growers and researchers a way to share timely and relevant information. We hope you'll enjoy and continue to engage with us. Thanks everyone for joining us on this atypical 1 p.m. Brown bag here for our third Friday of the month, July brown bag. I just want to wait till everyone pops in from the waiting room, but we have a pretty exciting, oh, for goodness sakes, there we go. We have a pretty exciting brown bag lineup today. Pam Verhulst of Ladybug IPM is going to give us updates from the field, and then Amaya Atucha, the professor from the Plant and Agro-Ecosystem Sciences and now department chair as well of Plant and Agro-Ecosystem Sciences, is going to give us an update on her work in field stress. To go through a little bit of housekeeping before we begin, if you have questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask the question directly. You are also able to type a question into the chat, and I'll be monitoring the chat to ask questions out loud. If you want to ask a question anonymously in the chat, use the drop down that says send to Allison Jonjak. That'll send the message just to me, and then I'll ask it on your behalf. I do have closed captions on for those who prefer closed captions. If you're not seeing them already, the gray bar should have a ... more, and then you should be able to add closed captions. My name is Allison Jonjak. I'm the Cranberry Outreach Specialist with the University of Wisconsin-Madison Division of Extension, and we're happy to bring these brown bags to you. One more thing before I dive into the agenda of the day. Leslie Holland did want me to let everyone know that this year there's free cranberry virus testing available for Wisconsin growers. This is through a grant from the Wisconsin Cranberry Board. And if you are seeing symptoms of viruses and you want to find out whether and which viruses are impacting your vines, I have a link to her sample collection protocol and then also the sample submission form so you can get those sent in. Feel free to ask, and I can give extra information about that. And I'm not familiar with all right. So given that, our quick intro here, I want to stop sharing my screen and share with Pam Verhulst, who's going to give us field updates thus far in this season.
All right, thanks. I will try and share. Oops. Okay. There we go.
Beautiful.
Okay. So this way, I gotta put this out of the way. Okay. I'm going to start kind of where we left off last month. We were talking about protoventuria leaf drop last month, and this is kind of what it looked like at that time. And we briefly mentioned like the plant vigor, the ones that have a lot of leaf spot just didn't seem like they were growing as well as uprights that didn't have all the leaf spot. And Dave Jones is doing, he takes 600 uprights across 6 different cultivars, and he's observing them to see if it's going to impact the yield. Because right now, all of the research that was done or literature that was printed on this say that it really doesn't affect yield and it's not a huge problem. But now we're just really curious when we have this much leaf spot if it's going to be. And this is what it looks like now. Back in May 28th, we saw those bullseyes with the white hyphea all around. And now pretty much everybody that wanted to spray already put a fungicide on. And those old leaves are falling to the bog floor and they look more like this. Okay, so last month, Jed talked about quinstar or quinclorac, and now that we're starting to get fruit set and we're moving out of bloom, growers are going to start thinking about using it again. Just remember you have to wait 30 days from your last application, and you also have to be aware of the 60-day pre-harvest interval. So 60 days, if you are going to be an early harvester, September 20th, 60 days from that is July 22nd. And that doesn't include the testing time. So just be aware of your last use date. Something else Jed said is the trials that he did for post-harvest were not really working. So don't expect any like noticeable results if you do it post-harvest. And also be aware if you are using these big, or if you're going to target larger weeds, it translocates to the growing point. So the control is going to look more like this, just curled on top, rather than all of these lower leaves being smoked or like controlled. Also, we talked about vines that were curling this year from quinclorac, and I was hoping to be able to see if like we were getting the bud set underneath these curls, but it's just a little too soon. We're just starting to see the bud setting for 2026, mainly in hybrids. So I wasn't able to have a picture for that of that for you, but this is what the curling looks like if you guys are curious. Okay, we had a lot of growers that didn't have to spray this spring because we didn't have all the Lepidoptera pests. We were sweeping, couldn't find enough cutworms, spanworms, sparg, that kind of stuff to spray at all. But I want you guys to be aware, and we need to also remember our past where if we flooded multiple years in a row, or we used the same mode of action multiple years in a row, specifically like insect specific, or we didn't spray, that some of these other pests start building up their populations. So this is tipworm, and these are the tipworm cups. I'm only seeing this on properties that didn't use like a broad spectrum in the spring. Specifically, well, most of you guys use fanfare, and if you use fanfare, I'm just not seeing tipworm on those properties. But growers that didn't spray, that flooded, or used delegate, I can find some tipworm. This little guy is your blunt nose, and again, the only properties we're seeing these on are the properties that didn't spray, flooded, or used delegate. Just a reminder, you guys are all aware that blunt nose leafhopper spreads false blossom. Now, during bloom or early hook, it looks like this, but in the coming months, late August and into early September, it's going to be really easy to see because the vines that have false blossom are going to turn purple or that dormant color a lot sooner than your healthy vines. So it really sticks out like a sore thumb. And if you go out there and look closely, you should be able to see some of these witch's broom like textbook symptoms. And if you're still not convinced, you can send it in. We had several hail events this year. Early on during like bloom, early set, and we can see all of the missing hooks and then the dents in the berries. I think one grower told me he has hail insurance and he got paid out for 25% damage. So I'm not sure exactly how much damage and how widespread it was, but we could see it. Toma, Warrens, Cranmore, and Plainfield. Allison already kind of touched on the scarring. If you want to know what virus you are seeing, you can send it in for free to Leslie. And this time of year is when it starts showing its ugly face.
I did send an email out, I believe last week, that had links to that protocol and to her shipping address. But if you need that again, or if you just need some extra assistance, You can reach out to Leslie directly. I think she might be out of the office today, but both Pam and I can also help you with that information until she's back.
Yeah. Cranberry fruitworm and black-headed fireworm eggs. So this time of year, we just kind of finished our fireworm sprays. Fireworm is usually first. We see 3 weeks of flight, and then we start looking for eggs. And once we find the eggs, then we time that spray, and it's usually a little bit ahead of the cranberry fruitworm sprays. Cranberry fruitworm, this is an adult, lay their eggs on swelling pinheads, and then the they usually lay their eggs right on the calyx, which is the bottom part there. And somebody watched and and kept time, and it said it takes about 2 hours for them to hatch and or from the time they hatch to climb up and go into a berry. So this is the first berry. It hatched here, climbed in there, sealed the door is what we say, used a little silk and sealed it, ate the inside of that berry, climbed into this next berry right here, and then climbed out of this berry up here somehow and into this one. And that's where I found it. So it's one upright and it already made it into 3 berries. Here are our traps over the weeks. And what I did is I did averages and then we did the highs. So we are seeing a peak last week for sparg. And typically we time our sparg sprays 2 weeks after peak flight. However, we are peaking in the Warrens-Toma area with 5 sparg in a trap. We are just not getting a lot. And our highest numbers were maybe like 28 in a trap for that area. Cranmore, very similar, like very, very low average for sparg. And our highs were less than 10. And to put this into perspective, I looked back in 2019 for all of our, I don't have nice graphs like this back then, but we were averaging about 40 to 50 sparg in a trap, and our highs were over 100. So we just don't have the sparg pressure like we used to. And we weren't really sure, like last year was low, and we're like, I don't know, maybe their lures aren't working. What's going on? So we bought lures this year from 2 different companies, and we have 4 different lots out there, and it's consistent across. Very, very low. Here's City Point Babcock areas, only like 5, and our max was like 30 to 40. Plainfield, which usually doesn't, as it still doesn't really have fruitworm numbers. They're like sitting here at 19, but again, hardly any sparg. So using our trap indicators and what we're seeing, we're trying to decide right now, working with each grower, whether they need to spray a second fruitworm spray. It just depends on who you are. If we are finding fruitworm in your beds and you're still getting like 70 cranberry fruitworm in a trap or over 60, you're probably going to be following up. Typically that second spray is for sparg, but if we aren't seeing the sparg number, but we're still finding fruitworm pressure, then you'll still be following up a spray. But for the most part, a lot of growers are going to get away with one spray, especially on their Stevens. Some of the hybrids that were sprayed early on will have to be repeated just because of some of the trap indicators. All right, this is probably our number one question and concern right now is this bed over here on the left is a Stevens, and it is just poofy. We have so much growth. We have red tips. And then you have like a hybrid over here. This is a Haynes, and it's just short growth, beautiful. Lots of fertilizer. This one, I think like 35 pounds at this time. And then the Stevens has not been fertilized at all. And it looks like this. So the questions that we're getting is, how do I know when to fertilize? What should I do? If you look really close, you can see some pinheads and peas forming. And if you dig down, you can find more. So that's a question getting, and then we're also seeing the yellow vine syndrome. So typically yellow vine syndrome comes in wet years, and we also see excessive growth in Stevens on wet years. Yellow vine syndrome could be leaching away, it could be wet feet, but whatever's happening, the plants are not getting the nutrients they need, and they're turning yellow. And you can see up here, eventually the margins will start to turn brown. Um, and this one is probably brown this week. This was taken last week. So what we do to treat this is continue fertilizing your with the granular like you would, and then we use some liquid to try to supplement and get the color back. But those are the observations from the last couple weeks. Real quick and easy. So I don't know if you have questions for me. Otherwise, Amaya is next if you have questions for her.
Let's take a minute to have questions for Pam. Again, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask directly, or you can ask through the chat. I'll pause and see if we've got questions coming in. If not, I'll just ask Pam, when's the last time you saw the yellow vine syndrome in kind of a widespread way? Like when's the last year that was a relevant um, you know, topic on?
Yeah, well, this year I think I'm up to like 4 growers, and some have it on like a couple different beds, and it's in different varieties. So it's in like a Stevens. The pictures I was sharing, I think that's a Crimson Queen. So it's very much just the growing. It's environmental, obviously, because it's across different marshes. The last year, it's been a couple years since we've had it on multiple properties. We've seen it on like repeat properties. So if you find it in one of your beds, um, chances are it's going to go, like if it's going to happen again, it's going to happen in that bed again. So we have guys that use a little bit of liquid just as a preventative moving forward. They've just been doing that and haven't been getting the yellow vines. But some years it's not an issue, and this is one of the years it is, and it's from all the rain, I really think.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes complete sense. Just see if any other questions came in while I was asking that one, but I don't see any yet. So I guess let's go ahead and move along to Amaya, who is going to give us an overview of heat stress, the research that's been going on in that area in her lab over the last couple of years, and management strategies. And then we can open up to questions again for both Amaya and for Pam. Thank you so much, Pam, for those field updates. A good broad across diseases, across insects, across herbicides, and across growing in nutrients. So appreciate the broad look.
Hi, everybody. Just to follow up a little bit on a couple of comments about what Pam was saying about the yellow vine syndrome. I agree 100% on what Pam is describing, and we have had many conversations with Pam about this. That it seems to be, it always happens sort of like in the same areas, and growers that have seen it see it over and over again on the same spot in years that we have a lot of rain. And I think probably what's happening it's a combination of maybe some nutrient leaching, which I wouldn't anticipate to have a lot of it given the type of nitrogen, the ammonium that we're using. But I also think it has to do with those spots might be having like more moisture retention, which is affecting the roots. And so even if the nutrients are there, the roots are not taking them up because they're impaired with maybe too much soil moisture. It would be interesting for those growers that have those patches, whether they have a soil moisture probe that they can put in there and monitor if that's the case. And the solution of applying some foliar nitrogen, it's a good sort of like solution, given that if the what we're saying is being our main constraint of the roots not taking up nutrients, just applying foliarly would be a good solution to try to bring back some of that chlorophyll content to those uprights. So yeah, we can't feed them, we can't provide them all their nutrition foliarly, and we know that foliar applications are not really very effective in cranberries, especially as the leaves get older. But it's better than nothing. And so that is certainly could be a temporary solution. When it comes to what Pam was describing about some of these, especially in Stevens and some of these other varieties that are showing a lot of vegetative growth, I think a lot of that is coming. It's the same situation in which we have moisture in the soil and we have a warm temperature, so there's a lot of mineralization happening and a lot of release of nitrogen from the organic matter that builds up over time. So in those cases, I would encourage growers not to apply more fertilizer. If you're having substantial vegetative growth of your uprights, that's an indication that there's enough nutrients there. They're just being diverted towards vegetative growth. So applying more fertilizer is just going to make them grow more and more and more. So I will hold on the fertilizer. So those are a couple of comments about that, and I'll go ahead and start sharing my presentation, which is about actually heat stress.
Okay, and I got one question from Rodney in on genetic purity that we'll address after Amaya's heat stress presentation, just so that we don't forget.
Yeah, perfect. Sounds good. All right.
Presentation. Rodney had asked specifically back in Pam's image of the Haines next to the Stevens and the Stevens deeply overgrown. Rodney asks, could the Stevens be losing their genetic purity? And I know this is a question that is probably mostly Juan directed. I'm going to drop a link in the chat here to a 2004 paper from Dr. Zalapa's lab that shows a little bit of how they were able to line up visual assessment of vine purity with genetic testing of vine purity. I want to ask both Amaya or Pam for opinions or input on to what degree the Stevens overgrowth is likely to be kind of purely nutrient related versus being genetic related versus a mixture of those or other things.
I think the best way to figure it out would be if you get this overgrowth every year, it could be very much, that is there's this barren vine that one describes. But this is something that you occasionally get, a year like this, but last year you never saw this overgrowth. Then I think it's more related with the environmental conditions.
That makes complete sense.
Yeah, I agree. And we do sample for growers all the time. When we did that Cranberry, especially, we sampled thousands, like we sent in thousands of uprights for one. And you can still send samples in if you think like, no matter what I do, these vines are always crazy. It might not be a Stevens, but I think this year it's happening across the board more. So I think it's probably more of an environmental thing this year, but certainly some vines that are showing it could be not really Stevens.
That makes complete sense. I'm just showing an image that I thought was really helpful in that 2004 paper. And Pam, I think you're a co-author on that. So good job with the thousands of samples.
Yeah, I think I took this.
Yeah, I thought this picture was really good in that you can see a crisp, this is Stevens and this is likely not Stevens anymore. So just a little bit to share there. Any other questions? Oh, great. And Amaya also shared the link to the fact sheet from Rutgers on heat stress in Cranberry. Any other questions coming in on any of Pam's topics, any of Amaya's topics? Otherwise, I want to thank everyone for being flexible and joining us at the atypical 1:00 hour, and hope that no one's stomach rumbled too much for our presentations today, but hope that you're out back out into the marshes, and we'll all look forward to seeing you at the mini clinics at Summer Field Day in just under a month here. Thank you, Amaya, and thank you, Pam.
Thank you, Allison.
Thank you for that really in-depth overview, Amaya. I know we've been seeing this heat stress work been going on over the past year and last year, and have been looking forward to hearing what are we learning under those heat stress chambers. So very exciting look, and glad to hear that there's also work being done on what we might be able to do to protect the vines from that. So thank you. Again, if people have questions, either unmute yourself and ask directly, or type into the chat for everyone, or type into the chat using the to Allison Jonjak dropdown, and I can ask anonymously for you. I will also, while we wait to hear a couple questions in, and of course I have not forgotten Rodney's question on genetic purity, but I am going to share my screen to go over a couple of upcoming events, so that people can hear those coming in while we're coming up with questions. So a reminder that this year the Cranberry Summer Field Day hosted by the Growers Association is going to be at the Habelman Brothers Millston Marsh. That's 1493 Aqua Road on August 15th, which is a Friday. The event overall runs 8:30 to 3, and there will be extension mini clinics specifically from 10:30 to 11:30. That's going to be in the meeting area. Jed Cahoon, Amaya Atucha, and Leslie Holland are all going to present at that. So do hop in and join us there in just under a month. I had another couple of upcoming. One more reminder of the virus testing, and I will then bounce back to the chat, and we'll have a question specifically on heat stress, Amaya. The cooling irrigation, we're used to performing 15 minutes of irrigation when the temp is over 91 Fahrenheit in Quebec. How would what would be the maximum number that you'd recommend to do in a very hot day? And I'm not sure whether that means the maximum number of minutes or the maximum intervals of irrigation that they're doing.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So in other settings, with other fruit crops, what we try to do is keep monitoring the temperature so you can cycle in and out. So very similar to what we use for spring frost. So you will turn on the irrigation for 15 minutes, you turn it off, and that in those 15 minutes, the canopy temperature is going to decrease. But then as soon as you turn it off, that temperature is going to start creeping up. And so once it gets up again to that threshold, which is this 91 Fahrenheit, you would have to turn it on again. I don't think that there's a limit to the amount of times that you want to do. What you want to make sure is that you need to monitor what's happening with the temperature, because in a day, which is again, very hot and very dry, it might be that from the moment you turn it off, the irrigation, to the moment that the temperature goes up again to 91 might be very short. In a day that is hot, but maybe there's a little bit more relative humidity, that change in temperature for it to creep up all the way again to those 91 Fahrenheit might be at a lower rate. So I think that the main takeaway or the message would be you need to be monitoring. And so that is something that we're not necessarily equipped with. And some of the things that we're hoping to develop in this grant that I talk about, and this is something working also with the blueberry growers, is could we have some sort of system in which you are constantly monitoring the air temperature, and then the overhead irrigation for evaporative cooling turns on and off. As you reach that 91, it turns on. When the temperature, let's say you set it to go all the way down to 85, it turns off. But then again, when it goes up, it turns on again. And it could be 15 minutes, it could be 5 minutes, it could be 10 minutes, whatever it takes to get the temperature down. So I don't have an answer for that. I think it will depend on the kind of environmental conditions that you're having in every specific day, and you can only know that by having some active monitoring system.
Yep, and that's the follow-up question was would you cycle every 2 or 3 hours? But I think you just answered that perfectly with you need to monitor, and they don't want to signal to the plant to grow too vegetatively. So apparently there's a needle to thread there.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with that. That you might be that might be a concern that you're really saturating the soil, but in those conditions, you would also expect that the plants by themselves are transpiring a lot, so they're taking a lot of water from the soil. So even though you're irrigating and you're like, putting that water there, that water is also evaporating really fast. So it would not be the same case if it were to be, a cooler day with higher humidity in which, the plant would be transpiring less. So yeah, I hear you concerned. That's why we need to do more research.
Definitely. I want to return unless there are other questions on the heat stress topic, and thank you very much for a very, very informative